go ahead. Yeah.
All right.
Go
So
right ahead.
we're going to talk about the Recovery Coach Commission. We'll let it go
Sure.
from there, right? And I got a listener email I want to address.
Get
too.
the out of here.
Oh,
Get the fuck out of here.
Here we go.
Awesome. It wasn't me. I swear to God.
Oh, man.
No, it wasn't you. It was from someone from North Shore Community College.
Explosion.
Okay, welcome to Buds with Suds. The which one is this?
20, I think. Is it big 20? Is it big 20?
Oh, the show?
I think, yeah,
it
is
is.
it?
It is number 20.
Oh, this is like
I'm trying to think of the round
fifth
table.
or
It's gotta be
sixth
the
round table?
fourth or fifth or sixth round table. And we've got Danny Ginivan, Katie O'Leary, and Doris. I just want to remind everyone first that you can listen to us on, what is it now? iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, and I know there's one more. But if you are on iTunes, just go ahead and rate us. Give us 5 stars if you can. It really helps out. And you can also find the number to reach us at and leave us a voicemail on the website at budswithsuds.com. So I think we're trying to figure out what the hell we were going to talk about today. And I think it's the last Recovery Coach Commission, which was, when was that? Anyone?
Yeah.
It was in
25th?
mid-June. They have one
Thanks for
more
being so
meeting.
talkative.
They have one more meeting on
The
July
17th.
Yeah, the 18th or the 7th. Yeah, the 18th. Yeah, 17th.
So it was a couple weeks ago.
June 17th. It was Bunker Hill Day.
Let's
Yes, it
just
was.
round it down to a couple weeks ago.
It was Bunker Hill Day.
And so who wants to get us started? What happened over there? That was the last one, right? Was that the last?
No,
one?
there's one more.
There's one more.
There's one more where they're going to provide the final draft.
Yeah.
That's next week, right?
So this,
July
yeah, it's
15th.
coming out, yeah. So this was them basically talking about the beginnings of, so they wrapped up basically all the listening sessions, any of the reports that were presented in all the panels. So that's basically what they're drawing from to put forward their recommendations. Those were the only things they stayed on that topic. So if any those topics, because when the panelists were talking about things, if they went outside of, so if they didn't hear it at a listening session or see it at one of those presentations or from one of the panels, Mary Lou was just, well, that's not what we're here to talk about today.
And so,
And-
Dennis, that's Mary Lou Sutter, right?
Mary Lou Sutters, yes, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Yeah, Health and Human Services,
Thank you.
yes. So, yeah, so that's basically what they did for this. So for this one, it was just the beginning of the early drafts of their recommendations. They went through like all the different listening sessions, all that, and talked about things they got from it, and they started, they're going to come up with some more recommendations.
So this was kind of like the pre-wrap up.
It was wrapping it up to, get everything together for what they're going to talk about between now and next month. They have to have their report in by, what was it, August? Yeah, but they want to have it before then.
They said it was a very rough
They
draft.
said draft of the draft
Well,
of the draft.
what does that mean?
Well, there was stuff on there that probably won't be included in it. There was just topics of discussion that they wanted to get feedback from the commission members on there on. There were one of the sticking points was having a role or discussing how to define recovery and lived experience within the role as a recovery coach, and sort of saying that there should be some sort of role for someone who doesn't have lived experience. That was something that was brought up multiple times at the listening sessions that they wanted to give credence to, I guess, and say like...
And that was kind of like that recovery navigator kind of
That's
thing.
what
right?
Adam
exactly.
Stoller from Mass Health. So they basically across the board, a unanimous lived experience is going to be a recommendation.
So similar to a family partner is
Correct.
what
Yeah,
they
they
said.
kinda brought-
but
yes.
Adam Stoller did say that
An RSN.
the RSN was pretty much developed.
That's what they had
for
in
that.
mind. Yeah.
RSN is what? Recovery
Support navigator.
Support navigator. And what did
Very
they,
similar to a CSP worker. It's somebody who
what's CSP?
community
Support
support provider or
yeah.
program.
Okay.
Yeah. So they connect them with housing.
Yeah.
Just a short term. It's a very short term service. I don't know about the RSN, what that is, if it's short term.
primarily
But
the same.
it's a short term service.
Yeah, we have community health workers here.
Yeah, where they
and,
just connect them to
community
get all
resource
their
also.
housing in and disability, all that stuff.
I just wrote the job description, but I don't necessarily know what it entails.
Remember it? Oh, for the
I mean,
RSN?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I mean,
So let's go back to the lived experience. How did that discussion go around?
That went relatively
Yeah, they were all-
quickly, and everybody sort of,
Yeah.
I would say, was on board, and there was no dissension amongst
No.
the people that thought we should not, the recovery coaching should not be people who identify as being in recovery.
Yeah.
Now, what they got caught up on, and I don't think they really discussed, which opened up another can of worms, is how do you define recovery?
Yeah. Well,
Right.
and
Well,
then-
so hold on, because that opens up.
but I think that is something they were going to do. I think they said
Yes.
Yes.
I want to clarify, and the reasons why I'm clarifying it will become apparent later, is that the Governor Baker's commission on the Recovery Coach Commission, led by Mary Lou Sutter, who is the
Sutters.
the Sutters, is it Sutters?
yeah, Secretary Sutters.
Okay, who is the head of Health and Human Services for the state of Massachusetts, right? This particular commission basically looks like it determined that recovery coaches should have lived experience, meaning that they've had experience with drug or alcohol use.
Personal.
Correct? Am I right?
Yes.
Personal lived
you.
experience as identifying as a person in recovery from their own personal use.
And then what they went on to say was, like BSAS kind of recommends the 2 years. They came up with sustained recovery was another word that came up, and they were then trying to define what sustained recovery would look like or be, and yeah, they kind of went down that road. So,
I left after 20 minutes, so.
but it was a good 20 minutes.
Did you have to be somewhere, or were you tired of it after 20 minutes?
They were I think I got bored, to be honest. I mean, they were going through things with a fine-tooth comb,
Yeah.
and they were doing their due diligence, but it wasn't anything that I hadn't heard before because I went to most of the listening sessions, and I was at all of the commission meetings. So I heard primarily all of the presentations, but I think the fact that they took the time to actually go over everything line by line shows me that they were at least paying attention to something. They might not have all remembered certain things that were said, but it was all documented.
So this is one of the recommendations. The credentialing standards should require lived experience and sustained recovery. So that's one of the things that was on the PowerPoint that they put in.
You took screenshots, didn't
I
you?
did. I sent it to Richard. The credentialing standards should allow an alternative certification, easy for you to say, for individuals without lived experience. And then the credentialing process should be state-sponsored in order to increase transparency, authority, and responsiveness to the public. So that was like the training part of it, the credentialing. You know how they have it broken down into 3 separate things? That was the credentialing part of it.
Did they get into why they thought that the I'm backing up a little bit, but did they get into why there was they felt that there should be lived experience in that?
Not in this one. They were just
Well, they brought up the peer model, and so they did talk a little bit about that, the peer model, and then I just think hearing from everyone, and like at the listening sessions and things like that. They said there was a pretty good debate, not a debate, but a spirited discussion at the one down the Cape,
yeah.
There
where there were
was.
people that from both camps, the lived experience camp and the regular people
There
camp.
was a lot of family members
Yeah.
that seemed to be present that wanted to be recovery coaches and were told that they could not be, but couldn't really specify as to who told,
Who told them that?
that they couldn't.
I'd be surprised if anybody.
And then some people that were recovery coaches, it was like a pretty open discussion. It wasn't
Yeah.
it wasn't like any of the other listening sessions I went to. Like they were letting people
Talk.
to each other rather than talk to the panel.
That's kind of what they said, that there was a good exchange, and they wanted.
It was healthy too. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Nobody was bashing anybody.
Yeah, that's
it was
what they
very
said.
educational and informal and informational. I think for both sides.
And I think that's why they, one of the reasons why they want to go out of their way to make a separate certification process for like whether it's family members or people without lived experience.
That's not.
So-
That's not such a bad idea, right?
No,
I
it's
mean,
not. But so they can get into the workforce as they started talking about later on.
Well,
Because that's
families
really
get affected too.
Oh,
I mean,
sure,
I don't
yeah.
know how many
Families
parents I
have to
have
recover.
blowing up my phone, and like, it gets frustrating. And I would love to be able to hand them off to another parent who's gone through it.
Well, that's the thing, right? And that's what Magnolia does, right? Magnolia New Beginnings with,
Yeah.
with Maureen Cavanaugh.
Yeah.
I mean, I did a podcast with her a little while ago, and she's got her own podcast too, and that's her area of expertise, right? It's like you don't have
Joanne Peterson, there's a
Fam-
whole.
families don't go to AA; they go to Al-Anon, right?
When I
And
did
there's
door
a reason for
knocks,
that.
that's who I primarily interacted with, was families.
Yeah.
I didn't get the person that overdosed 90% of the time. It was their family.
Right. I mean, I understand that people who have family members or friends and stuff that are us, and they want to help and they want to become recovery coaches to help, but that's never made any sense to me, right? It's like go to what's they meet right here, the family and
Learn to
friends
Cope?
support. Yeah, Learn to Cope and
Yeah,
stuff like
Joanne
that.
Peterson.
Right, and Maureen Cavanaugh's group and Magnolia, and join some Facebook groups and get some support for yourself. Right, I have a hard time understanding people who haven't been through this. I don't have a hard time understanding why they would want to be recovery coaches. I have a hard time with that being acceptable.
Yeah.
Right. And so from what you guys are saying is that the commission pretty much agrees with that.
Yes, I think it came up that there are other positions that they can pursue.
That's how it.
How
I
whether it was a
perceive
LADAC or what a family partner. Adam brought up the RSN. So there are other opportunities for them that they want to,
Okay,
help
so
them.
so that begs a couple other questions that I'm going to guess that they didn't either come up or that they didn't really ask. But one, what do you determine to be recovery? And two, how do you determine if someone has lived experience?
Thank
So-
God I do not have that job.
Well, this is, they talked about the peer support,
Yeah.
the way they do it. Go, you can speak on that because you went through it. But
I mean so DMH, the Department of Mental Health, and the certified peer,
Transformation
the
Center.
Transformation Center, the certified
Recovery
peer
is real.
specialist, the certified peer specialist training, you have to self-disclose and go through an interview process to just get in the training, and then you have to take a test and do the training. There is a vetting process. So what and BSAS has started to do some of that with their vetting process. You have to call up and ask and identify,
you can't self-refer, really.
yeah, I mean, they have to, so there is some of that being done, but it's not, if it was at the state level where they said you have to identify as being recovery, and this is how we're going to define it, right? The problem is you're going to get a lot of different opinions on how you define recovery. Because if you look at like SAMHSA's definition of recovery, or is it abstinence, you're going to have a lot of people arguing different things, and then you're never going to know who's in recovery, how you define recovery.
Right.
So that's going to, just complicate a lot of things unless they're very black and white about stuff. And it's hard to be black and white about something like that. I don't know how you define that as a state.
So in those organizations that you were talking about, how do they determine whether or not someone has lived experience?
Self-disclosure, that's it. I didn't have to provide medical records or anything. I just said, this is my backstory. I had to provide a letter and interview and talk about my lived experience.
Yeah, you would hope the people doing the interviews would have some kind of, sense for that.
I had to
when
literally
they're talking to somebody.
I had to literally talk about my hospitalization when I wanted to kill myself.
That's going to create a ton of work for someone
Yes.
because it's going to fall on someone.
Well, it's going to be one person too.
Yeah.
Well,
Not necessarily. If so, they also talked about a board of registry.
Yep, board.
That was one of the things they wanted to address is when you're fit for duty sort of thing. Like if a coach has a relapse, how would the board address that? And to create that sort of buffer to help the public, right? And sort of there's a way to do it. So Ken Duckworth talked about what happens when a
doctors
doctor has to go through a process when they identify as having an addiction problem and they have a lapse, how they can still practice medicine and what they have to do in those steps.
Doctors pay money to have this like network of support set up for the doctors that go into like, whatever you want to call it, like the ones that have a problem, whether it's, they go into this almost like rehab type program, so they set them up. So say they relapse, they then have like an intervention type thing, or they self-disclose that they relapsed. They get put into this like EOP type, whatever it is, and they provide them with then a plan, so they have to go through all those steps in order to get their license back. And it's self-paid. They all pay into that system. The doctors do. So it's obviously that might not be something that we end up doing as coaches because we don't,
But the state might want to fund that to sustain this workforce until it's self-sustainable. And it also, if they charge, licensing fees, that can be part of that.
Yeah,
It just jumped 400%. So we're gonna have like at the end of this month, in 6 months.
How many of them don't have lived experience?
It's not gonna matter.
All right. So while we're on the topic of lived experience, I told you guys earlier that I want to do listener email. So this is kind of, and it ties right into this, which is not only ironic but fortuitous. And I'm trying to decide how, because this is like 4 paragraphs, and the second paragraph is pretty long, and I'm not sure I want to read the whole thing, but maybe if we read part of it, then address it, and then I can read the rest, and we can address it. All right. So this is from I'm not going to say who it's from, but I got this through the form on the website, and so here we go. I stumbled onto your podcast 2 months ago, and I thoroughly enjoy it. I actually teach at North Shore Community College and had been considering the recovery coaching training, so I must offer you some criticism. Starts out pretty good. Years ago, I earned a certificate in substance abuse counseling at Stonehill College and found during the first night of the program that I was the only participant not in recovery. Predictably, that led to some very interesting clashes in opinions and insights, and I believe it provided better understanding on both sides. This is where it gets good. I feel that your podcast is actually quite discriminatory in the way it views anyone who is not in recovery, and this is not unusual. Many people who I have known from 12-step programs have a very distinctive way of viewing the world, distinctive and often inflexible. When a program works for someone, it's viewed as the right way rather than a right way. Now he refers to Wendy Kent, who's the director of Project Cope. Wendy was the first guest who herself was not in recovery, and that became a large part of the discussion. You rationalized her success as being unique due to unique personality traits, but the traits listed need to be inherent in any counselor. She defended her role with an analogy that a doctor need not have had cancer to treat cancer patients. Not a great analogy, as cancer treatment is referring to medical, not social, emotional, mental health care. And this is, Danny, where you can comment on this. And he goes on, but replace that with something like eating disorders. Counselors of those afflicted aren't looking down upon if they are not anorexic. This is a very unique attitude. I've never heard an argument from any other population of people in need. This is what I was talking about: eating disorders, sexually abused, OCD, schizophrenic, etc., demanding that their services be provided only by those also afflicted.
Okay, so my thoughts on that are, this is a peer role.
Yeah,
so this isn't a counselor relationship. This isn't a counselor, someone receiving therapy. This is a peer role, a mutuality role. So it's hard to have mutuality when there's not, that same lived experience.
How do you? It's a shared lived experience.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So my thought is that, that's, some people, I'm not a 12-step thumper, Coach, some
I don't
coaches
think any of us have come on here. And,
No, I don't think so either. And the thing that gets me is that the title of the show is Buds with Suds.
Yeah, suds.
Right? Not
You go out of your way to.
It's like we all have substance use disorders, and we're talking about that, and we work in recovery around substance use disorder, and this dude seems to think that we're discriminatory because. Katie, you had something?
No, I just have a good analogy. Like when I took the ASAP class at UMass Boston, John Christian took the time to explain this because every person that seemed to be in that class self-disclosed as being in recovery of either alcohol or some form of drugs. And his analogy pretty much was, the LADC was not set up for that. It's just something that people want to give back, so that's how they get into this field. But what he said was, he was like, who's the best coach in the NFL? And of course everybody says Bill Belichick. And he was like, what would you do if I told you he never actually played a down in the NFL? And it was like, kind of made me think. So I don't know.
I get that, but he did play football.
I get that.
He just didn't play at the highest
didn't
level.
play at the NFL.
I never shot heroin. Does that mean I can't work with somebody that's, that's my,
I'm talking in regards to LADC. However, I do think that this is a pair role.
100%.
And the lived experience piece is crucial.
Right. You're saying that in the LADC that analogy makes perfect sense.
It does.
But in this role, it doesn't. Right?
It doesn't.
But here's the thing, too, is 40 years ago when the LADAC was in its inception, right? A lot of people who were in recovery were getting that because it was offered to mostly people in recovery, and it was almost a peer role, right? And over the last 40 years, through documentation and licensing and all that, they've managed to screw that up.
Scare everyone off.
Scare everyone off. And now here we are with a new role, that they'll probably manage to screw up in the next 5 years or whatever. But the idea that, we're somehow on this podcast being discriminatory, I find a little difficult to accept.
Yeah, I don't know what. I don't know exactly what he's talking about.
There were definitely other people too that didn't have lived experience that appeared on this show.
Yeah,
There's lots of roles in the addiction field for people without lived experience.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you. And
That's another thing I don't
This show happens to be about people with lived experience working in this role, right? I mean,
a lot of times, yeah. A lot of times it does, yes.
So let me keep going because it gets a little.
No, wait. He said he was a clinician before. What did he say he was before?
He got a certificate in substance abuse counseling.
Okay.
So he is a KDAC.
KDAC.
I think you should invite him on the show.
Yeah. Debate.
So next paragraph,
Change my mind.
Or her.
It gets your fear of poorly educated, incompetent, and opportunist recovery coaches has been, without any evidence, attributed to those who are not in recovery. I'm certain that there are examples of people in recovery who fit those categories.
There's tons of them. They're already working.
Just as there's those not in recovery that do. But it's not fair to paint with such a wide stroke and minimize the potential of people who may be quite skillful despite their lack of similar life experience.
I'd like to give him a wide stroke.
Let me I'm going to mark that point right there. And it continues. This is the last paragraph. I've been very frustrated with your podcast for this reason. Very interested in debating this issue with you, and Wendy offered some hope in reducing the discriminatory talk. But I fear that she's seen as an anomaly, a rare exception to the rule. I hope that you'll open up your minds to possibilities that may be outside of your own realm of experience, but not the impossibilities that you assume. Now, I'd like.
Hold on. Wendy doesn't coach.
Right. I know. But
she's not a coach.
But she does work in recovery, right? And I think that was his point.
There are plenty of people that work in recovery that are not coaches that don't have lived experience. And nobody's taken away from the fact that they're really effing good at their job. Yeah. Really, really good at it. And they probably paved the way for us in some way, shape, or form.
Right. Right. I mean, I looking back, I do have and I'll take the interview with Wendy as an example, is that it does surprise me sometimes to a degree that people who don't have lived experience are working in this field, in the field of recovery, right? Because I personally think it's difficult to understand if you haven't had the experience. That's my own personal. I'm not saying that they're not doing a great job. I'm not saying that they're not. And my attitude to that is changing only because. And I'll go back to a quote that I had a while ago, and it's actually from Refuge Recovery. It's probably the only sentence in the book that I liked. Was that all addicts and alcoholics are an exaggerated manifestation of the human condition, right? So when I talk about what I think I have more of, regardless of the fact that I don't know if I actually have more of it, quote unquote, normal sensitive people who don't have a drinking or a drug problem identify with what I'm talking about because they feel it to a certain degree also, except that for me, it was something that caused me to almost drink myself to death, right? So, but that level of understanding of my own feelings and how I'm affected, I think that's paramount to my role as a coach and to dealing with other alcoholics and addicts.
But I think the core root of this disease is pain. And I think that every and all human beings feel pain at some point in their life. So if you can identify with that, then there's got to be a way to kind of break it down so that you can identify with somebody else's pain.
Yeah, to a simple level, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, and I think we've discussed this. And another human being can help another on some level, you know. So I've certainly had people throughout, like being in programs and things like that were not addicts or that just caring. Just sometimes remembering your name when you walk into a group. Oh, Dennis, what's up? Like,
Yeah.
Just simple stuff like that, showing they care. Like that stuff meant the world to me sometimes when I was in programs. I'm like, oh, this person cares. That's all that mattered to me. Because there were people certainly that had addiction that sucked, like that were terrible, running groups or just were like burnt out. Or, you know what I mean? They just sucked with people. And so I have certainly throughout my journey, not in this role, like that's like this role I think is for us. This is our job. Like that's what I feel. But you know, there are certainly other
There's
jobs.
a magic involved in that
Yeah,
connection.
I just think this role is for us. That's all.
And the part where he talks about the fear of poorly educated, incompetent, and opportunist recovery coaches, that's pretty much true in any field, isn't it? So why wouldn't I be afraid of them being in this one?
Yeah, I don't.
I see poorly
There's a
educated.
ton of
I see-
opportunists in this field.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is any major crisis. Any major crisis in a
Brings
country
out the
this
sharks.
size brings the trolls out from under the rocks.
There's money involved.
Of course, there is.
Just wait until commercial insurance starts authorizing,
They already are.
on a wide scale basis.
Yeah.
Once they start allowing for billing, you are going to see a lot more, recovery coaching
Grimy,
happening.
shady.
Yeah.
No, I know. I saw it during the financial
Watered
crisis.
down.
I saw it during the financial crisis. Every scumbag on the earth came out from under their rocks to start collecting money from homeowners. And I predicted the same thing was going to happen here, and it does. You've got recovery coaches working out on Marblehead Neck that are charging $1,500 a week, for one person, because desperate moms and dads are desperate enough to pay that, right? So there is one part here that I want to address, and
Hold on. What's wrong with that, though?
Well, depends on the quality. Yes, you're right.
What's wrong with that? If someone can afford, if I'm providing a good, I'm just saying, what if they can afford that and they're not being taken advantage of? Who's to say that, you can't have it? It's America. It's private practice. If I want it to be a private practice recovery coaching,
but Danny, I'm sorry. I have to really disagree with that, because whether or not you have $1 million or 20,000, you can still be taken advantage of.
I'm not saying you can't,
and
but
you're going to stand a better chance of being taken advantage of if you have a ton of money.
So there's no private practice people that can have ethics and morals?
Well, it's kind of like saying, look, here I want to buy a new Subaru, and I make under $100,000 a year. It's like, well, okay, well the car's $20,000, and then someone from wherever comes in and they're making $1 million a year, and you go, oh, you want this car? It's $100,000. right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay, but that goes to regulations. That's not, like, that Subaru doesn't, Subaru
This
charges.
isn't regulated yet.
Yeah, it needs to be regulated. I'm okay with that, but I have no problem people, making a living.
Well, I'll tell you. Going back again to the mortgage crisis, right? Is that the attorneys that were doing stuff to help the foreclosure crisis, that were helping families lose their home, and 11 million people did, were the ones making all the money, and the ones that were actually helping homeowners were living out of their cars, right? And that's generally how things go around here. And I'm seeing the same thing happening with recovery coaches. That there is nothing good about someone charging $1,500 a week to be a recovery coach.
I've seen people charge more.
Depending on what level of service are they getting.
Should it really matter?
I don't know. You tell. If you're getting, depending on what they're
if
providing.
If there was a massage or a sleepover incled, would that you think that would be worth the $1,500? I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking about what I mean. Really, is there some recovery guru that's going to be worth $1,500 a week, and that will only work with people who are wealthy enough to be able to afford that?
Free market economy, isn't it?
I think at some level it becomes not coaching though. Like, I
Okay,
think
yes.
you start getting asked to do.
Yes, agreed. Now,
Babysitting.
Yes.
yeah.
I
So
think
there's a level
we
of.
were talking about it a little while ago.
Does somebody have ethics and keep fidelity to recovery coaching? But if I wanted a recovery coach right now, I couldn't have one based on my insurance. So I'd have to pay out of pocket.
You're going to pay that much money?
Not necessarily.
Sure
Not
you
if you
could.
went to an outpatient clinic.
Yeah, you could go to Pari.
Oh, yeah.
Or North Shore Physicians Group. You can have a PCP. You get a doctor, you get a nurse practitioner, you get a full service collaborative care along with a recovery coach. So you could. Now the one part that I want to, because I don't know where this came from, but Katie,
I don't know where most of it came from.
Yeah, I know, I don't either. But Kate, I'm going to have to listen back to all 19 shows
Yeah, you're
and find out where he came up with this. But Katie and I were kind of talking about it on the phone earlier, and this is always a sticky topic that I get into, and I just want to know what you guys feel about this. And then depending on how badly I'm attacked, I may just cut out the whole segment. But where he says your fear of poorly educated, incompetent, and opportunist recovery coaches. So I've had several conversations on this show, and some of you guys were involved in this, is that looking at the landscape, looking at what's available in this arena, simply because of who we're looking at, and we're looking at people with lived experience, right, who have been drinking and drugging since they were 12 years old. I've never said, in fact, I said the opposite, that none of us are necessarily stupid. In fact, the majority of us are incredibly smart, but the majority of us are also uneducated. Would you guys agree with that?
I think it's like 50-50.
As far as like formal education,
There's a lot, yeah. There is a lot of that, yes. I know what you're saying.
Right? And I'm not-
In recovery in general. You mean recovery coaching or just...
recovery coaching and in recovery in general.
Yeah, I don't know. I see it a lot. Like, people...
That's not to say that people don't.
There's lots of people that go back, or
Yeah,
sure,
absolutely.
But, yeah, I see it, but then there are people that also started using later. I see that a lot too. Started doing perks in their 40s because they got into a car
But there are
accident.
some people that are extremely educated that have absolutely zero common sense.
Of
No,
course,
no,
yeah.
I agree with that. But most of the people that are sitting through these classes that are willing to take this level of pay, right, probably don't have a good formal education because, one, otherwise they'd be doing something else that pays a lot better, or two, I don't know what two is. I'm just saying that it's not to say that there aren't a lot of smart people, because most of us are pretty smart, right? But a formal education doesn't seem to be the norm in the recovery coaching community. And that's not to say that that makes people stupid. It just
I don't think you've ever called anybody stupid.
it just makes them uneducated.
I think it's just you look at what recovery coaches are getting paid, and somebody that's going to have a bachelor's degree is not going to want to take that amount of pay usually for most coaching jobs.
I don't. Yeah,
It's entry level.
I don't know how I feel because I've turned down jobs in recovery coaching, making more money than I make right now. So it's
So have I.
to me, it's not.
And I have a formal education.
I don't do this job because I can't make more money somewhere else. I really don't. Like I don't. That's,
Yeah, I don't either.
So that's what I mean.
I don't either, but I
don't think I don't.
Well, and a lot. Okay, so let me get real specific then, because this was an issue that actually Katie and I had dealt with today, and it's because of certain comments that I've made around this, and it has to do with classes that I've been in that are particularly around motivational interviewing. Okay, and I don't have a problem with motivational interviewing, but what I've suggested to instructors and people leading these classes on motivational interviewing is because of the lack of education and formal education that is consistently and for the most part in the room taking these classes, that teaching motivational interviewing without a precursor to it being a modality that can be used as a tool that you're probably already using, people who aren't used to sitting in a formal setting are going to take that class as this is how you need to do your job. And I've seen that happen over and over and over again. And I'll give you an example. I'll give you a very concrete example. Is after this MI class, we were doing role playing, and the guy who was supposed to be the recovery coach said, so, what's your goal for the next 6 months? And I had to come up with a goal. So I said, I want to ride my bike more. And he said, well, give me 5 reasons why you want to ride your bike. And I said, well, I'd like to lose some weight, and I'd like to start exercising again. And that's it. And he goes, I told you I want 5. Right? Now that's taking, right? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, that's taking instruction to a level that doesn't need, and it's not because the guy's an idiot. It's because the guy has never sat in a college level course or anything where you have to interpret what is going on and not take it as the rule of law, and that's how you're going to do your job. And I think that's more of the substance behind what I've been saying around this kind of stuff, is that I think particularly when we're doing, and you, Katie, you had mentioned that they're going to open up the classes at UMass. They already do it at North Shore Community College, and these are instructors that are used to teaching at a higher educational level than high school or middle school. And when
UMass is using BSAS's facilitators, so I think Tulani is actually the only one facilitating at UMass currently, which is an excellent choice if you ask me.
Well, and I think there's a fine line too of how we determine how we're going to teach a class, because you don't want to dumb it down and assume that everyone's an idiot, right? But you also, I think there has to be some kind of explanation of like, listen, everything that you're going to learn here is stuff you probably already know. There's some stuff that you're gonna not know that we're gonna teach you, that you're here because you already know how to do this and you're already good at it. We're putting a name to it, and we're giving you some more tools that you can use that will help you
enhance
what you're already doing. And I just don't think that's clear enough. I don't think it's clear enough in any class that I've taken.
Was that the specific MI training that was for recovery coaches?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't take it, so I can't really.
Yeah, it was at North Shore Community College. It was
I don't think what I took. I don't think it was called MI for recovery coaching when I took it.
Yeah, see, I took a specific one that BSAS did. That was.
Oh, was that the class I was taking? No, it was at North Shore Community College. It was part of the second.
You took the MI one down with me though too, down in wherever it was with Fell and Blair.
I did.
Yeah, you took that one.
See, I liked that one.
That's the one I
found.
took.
That was, that was geared specifically towards the role, that talked about situations where you could kind of role play it out, and it was very. I like that one.
But nobody said that MI wasn't a great tool. That was
Right.
never said. No. What was said was there are also other tools that you can incorporate
Right.
to enhance
Right.
your knowledge.
I mean, again, I'd have to listen back through the other 18 or 19 shows to find when we bashed MI, but I don't think anyone bashed MI. But I do think, and maybe this will sound like bashing it, I do think that there is way too much importance put on MI, not only in the recovery coach community, but also, I mean, among clinicians. It's like it's the new hot thing to be using in psychotherapy and therapy and social work and everything. It's the new, little big gym
It gets
action
people
figure.
talking, though. That's the open-ended questions
Yeah.
portion of it. It gets people to open up. So people are already doing it without even knowing that they're
Yeah,
doing
that's-
it.
Exactly.
yes.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
It's a muscle. It's a skill. You learn it. It gets better the more you utilize it. And even though you don't realize, I probably do it a lot more often than I realize. Oh, I'm doing motivation. And no one says that. We're going to do motivational interviewing right now. Here we go.
Right. And I think from, at least from observing what I've observed, there's a tendency amongst the people taking these classes to look at it as, so this is the way I have to do it.
This is gospel.
Right.
This is
The playbook.
ABC.
And then you get into the danger you get into is that there's going to be this kind of fake conversation going on between people that isn't natural and is no longer what the role was designed for and defined as. That's my fear, and that I'm not against motivational interviewing. I'm against not giving it the precursor that it deserves before you teach it to people who aren't used to being taught.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, the only thing I ever said about I don't ever remember saying anything negative about it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
No.
But this guy thinks that I have this fear of poorly educated and
Well, you
incompetent
do.
and opportunist recoverers. If I had any fear of poorly educated, incompetent, opportunist people, I wouldn't have the three of you here.
Touche.
Exactly.
$200 an hour. Here I come.
That's right. Yeah.
I could have did that a long time ago.
$1,500 a
Right.
week.
I know.
What else you guys got? I just went on a little tear there, so I apologize for
Yeah,
that.
no, it's all good.
Are you ready to pee in a cup?
Oh yeah.
New hot topic.
Oh, that was at the Recovery Coach Commission, wasn't it, Danny?
That was.
So-
that was brought up as a potential overarching thing for
Everybody.
the way I took it was that either all mental health organizations as a whole would be subject to some sort of urine testing. What happened was someone brought it up. So it was brought up as how do we prove someone's in recovery or someone's
Sustained recovery.
It was brought up as just sort of like a way to prove someone is abstinent. And then it opened up the door to Mary Lou talked about, well, there had been discussions about it being at all levels for what I took it as, like from the CEO of corporations,
Anyone in the building.
that provide mental health services or anything that would come under her purview could be subject to a drug test. I don't know how I think she realized once
What she said.
Once it started, she was like, I better walk that back
Because
this
everybody
is gonna,
got stuck on it.
yeah, and
were
they
all
got
like,
stuck on it, and I
"What?"
don't think it's like they've probably had talks about it, and I think when you look at it, it'd be very hard to implement unless you're talking about just people who are licensed, who are practicing, that can then be subject to random drug screens on a whatever basis. And I think it's hard. That would be hard to do in the state because, if you have a clinician that smokes weed, but you have a recovery coach that smokes weed, is one not going to be able to be like, how do you differentiate someone, and how do you do that without getting a discrimination charge? That's asking for a lawsuit, in my opinion.
Yeah, the girl who brought it up was actually the girl who received service, the consumer. So she was just kind of throwing it out there, like, is there any way that we're monitored? And then it was brought up from Mary Lou that
Are
and
they
then-
supervised or unsupervised?
urines, I know, that's another thing. I don't think they can supervise you a lot of times. And then, so Ken Duckworth said, yeah, I mean, the only way you could, so many, the jobs that are urined a lot of times, he said, are just like entry-level jobs. So it would be like recovery coaches. And he said, you can't, it would have to be everybody or nobody. That you can't just urine recovery coaches. We all,
When we contracted
that.
with CHA, I had to take a urine
really.
Yeah, certain settings based on the funding.
because it was in the emergency.
Was it at the
department.
hospital? That's why
Yep.
I was at the hospital. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But were they urinating?
everybody.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They were.
To the whole organization then.
Yeah, so that's
Right.
that's
And I mean,
how you
and-
can do that.
I don't see how it would be possible to mandate that at a state level with different organizations and nonprofits and even private organizations. I don't even know how you could do that. I mean, I think the ACLU would have a real problem with that.
That was my point.
You know?
5 minutes, about 15 seconds after she brought it up, she said, "Just forget it. Just forget I even said it.
Well, because
forget I said it."
The point that
You
was
know?
brought up to me was, what about if somebody's on MAT and they
oh,
don't
yeah.
want to disclose to the organization they work for that they're on MAT?
Well,
I would hope the organization wouldn't be doing the urine and they wouldn't find out.
It would be a
the
private
state doing
entity.
it, the urine. So the state should never reveal that information. If they did,
it wouldn't go to
Shame on them.
I would own the urine company.
I
I know
personally
that.
don't like the idea of the state having that kind of information
well, the board.
or the board.
So
They already have it, Richard.
I know, I know,
It would-
Dennis. I know.
it
I
would
know.
be like
I know
if
your
you-
paranoia seems to.
Who pays for your MAT? You know,
I think what she was talking about more
who
is
pays for your Suboxone?
Yeah,
They
no,
already know you're on it.
I get it.
know?
My Suboxone or just
Yes, yours. Yeah. Right. See, you just admitted it on national television here. You're all done.
I wasn't even an opioid user and I'm on it. I didn't even know that.
You are now.
Wow.
I think I think what they were talking about drug testing would be like if you showed up messed up to work as a coach, and like whether that could be you could then be if your employer goes,
Sent to give a
hey,
random
yeah,
urine.
But
send-
then you're not fit for duty,
Right.
which
Yeah.
falls under a drug-free workplace
Yeah,
policy.
so then-
Right.
so then that's HR's deal. So
You could probably
you
do
know
that without it.
that would
going
go
on, right?
to the recovery coach board where then your license could be
so
suspended.
similar to nursing.
Yes. So that's what one of the things I want to get back to is they talked about next steps for what this could look like border registry, continuing education stuff. They talked about online trainings, how many
Checkmate.
hours, and how there are 50 hours required for specific things you have to do to get relicensed or continue to keep your license as a doctor. But then there's 50 hours that you can do. You can write a book or what that's what was talked about was like there's a certain amount that are very regulated and they have to be very specific, and there's 50 hours that aren't.
Yeah,
And one of the things that was brought up was the trainings that are available for recovery coaches are very not often enough, and you have to. Some people have to chase their trainings.
Infrequent, was that the word you're looking for?
There you go. Infrequent,
Sporadic.
and not geographically great for people out in the
Everybody.
western part
Accessible?
Of the state. Yeah, geographically accessible. There you go. Thank you. Got my thesaurus
words.
right here. Yeah.
So,
If I was a coach in the Berkshires,
they said,
how am I going to get trained and do my unless I'm driving 3 hours to go
What
take
do you
a
mean?
1 day
I have
training?
to drive to Springfield constantly.
Yes, I know you used to, but now, that's what was brought up was
they said some of the trainings outside the domain would
Yes.
maybe be okay to take online.
yes,
Which makes sense.
I agree with it.
Yeah, that makes
But
sense.
I do agree with the other portions that were brought up about like the peer-to-peer piece.
Yeah, no,
I think
absolutely.
Yeah.
There's certain trainings that should
It's
be
organic. You learn better
in
that.
person. However, there are other trainings that some could really benefit. Like, I'll speak for myself. Like Addictions 101, I would really benefit taking that course online.
Yeah.
Mental wellness, online. However, the RCA, ethical considerations, ethics and boundaries, there are certain trainings, trauma informed, that should be that peer-to-peer piece in person. I don't know. I just think
No,
that like
absolutely. I agree.
like the training I just took. I took a 3-day harm reduction for recovery coaches training. If that was an online training, I wouldn't have gotten out half of what I got out of it because what you got out of the training was done in all the small groups that you broke out into. Yeah. So, like there definitely has to be an in-person,
absolutely.
but split it up.
So this is what Dr. Duckworth said that I like. I really liked what he said. It was about the going to licensure. So he said, we are in Australia.
Shysters.
We will not go forever without being in a recession. So we said when the recession comes, people are going to be less likely to pay for services. And this is probably one of them right now because it's not taken that seriously. So in order to make it more legitimate,
Sustainable,
more legitimate and all that, so he said going to licensure and making the process,
Professionalized.
yes, that's what he was talking about, making it look better for everyone so it would be accepted better and not looked at as a service or, something.
What the insurance companies will find acceptable for them to
They'll be more likely to pay for it
Yes.
It is
when
considered
they don't have.
an added benefit to treatment right now.
So what do you guys get from the Recovery Coach Commission then? You guys have been to a lot more than I have. Do you see this going in a direction that's going to be workable and beneficial to the recovery coaching role, or do you think it's going to put a lot of just kind of needless pressure and what's the word I'm looking for?
constraint?
I don't think
Yeah.
a lot's going to change. I think the process of becoming a coach might change. I don't know if a lot will change after.
I think
the role
I think
itself?
it could change in terms of the licensing.
Well, yeah.
Who's going to work and be able to work as a coach? Like right now, Wild West. You saw a job description,
Oh,
and I
God,
think
yeah,
the
right.
licensing piece will remove those. Like you can call a recovery coach for anything right now. It's like, if I took, the example I used was I could take a mental health first aid class and then call myself a clinician. Is how I see a lot of these recovery coach jobs. And when you look at the job description, it's a direct care worker. It is not a recovery coach job description.
Yeah, that job description I gave you was like, take the RCA. So they didn't even want you to be certified. They accepted just the RCA.
Administer medication.
And then, there was all kinds of
really?
Oh, yeah. It was more like a case, I don't know what
a
it
direct
was.
care worker.
But it definitely was
say
not a coach.
They have recovery coaches.
That was at the Hope House, just to let everybody know.
So I guess I mean we're getting close to the end of the hour here. So I kind of want to wrap it up if you guys don't mind. But I guess what I'm trying to take away from at least this conversation is with what you've seen at the Recovery Coach Commission. Does it seem to you? And I guess I'm asking this again in a different way because I don't really feel like I got an answer. But
Give me one.
Do you feel that the larger answer is the Recovery Coach Commission, has this been a good thing and was it a good idea to have it? And do you see things? Do you see this as something that's going to help tighten up the role of the recovery coach, make it more, for lack of a better term, respectable, trustable? And do you think that the constraints or the possible constraints that they're going to put on the role and the way that it looks in the future and how people become recovery coaches is going to remove too many people from that role, or the right amount and make it a little tighter and easier to trust and have confidence in?
I personally think going to licensure is a great thing. The thing we also have to remember is these are just recommendations.
Nothing could happen.
Nothing could happen if the governor doesn't like them.
Okay.
So this could sit on his desk and die, and this commission could be all for nothing. Now, do I think that's going to happen?
I don't think that
No,
either.
because he's made public comments and this is what he wants. He wouldn't create a commission if he didn't want some recommendations. Now, might he get some other opinions on it and maybe change a few things or, cross some things out? Probably, depending on what political pressure he gets. I don't, who knows? I mean, this is, it's politics. It's not just, he's not just going to adopt every recommendation. Do I
But
hope?
it's not a bad thing.
No.
And it's not. I don't think it's a loss at all, just for the simple fact that, people that needed to gain some insight and knowledge as to what coaches are, got to.
And I think of all the commissions, this is probably the one that was, in my opinion, other than maybe the Section 35 one, that had the most likelihood of having some changes made from it, you know
The
what I
harm
mean?
reduction one will bring on some changes
Well, that
too.
too, but he already shot down the big one they wanted to,
Well, and this is going to surprise you, Dennis, because you and I come from completely
because I hate you.
completely opposite political views. But I actually do think that there's such a thing as too much regulation, and that's my fear. That's always been my fear about this commission.
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
Is that it's going to stifle what was an otherwise and still is an
Free
otherwise
form.
well, yeah, and we saw it happen with the recovery community 40 years ago, when it was kind of like a lot of people that were in recovery were doing that already, were acting somewhat as coaches and peer support, and then they tried to figure out a way for people to get paid doing that, and they opened that up to, you know, addictions counselors and things like that, and then they started regulating the crap out of it and making it really difficult and having to write more documentation and be licensed and do more around that, where it took away from actually treating people and more around documentation. And we're seeing our role kind of move into the same direction, where they call it tightening it up and regulating it, but what it actually does is put more work on the backs of a role that should be simply communicating between.
So that's why I think this commission was a good thing. Those people probably didn't have a commission to advocate for them, and like Katie said, a lot of people became aware of like what this role is about, and people advocated to not go down that road. So that's what you hope they listen to, was that stuff. Don't
overdo
regulate
it.
the out of this. Excuse me, mark that. But yeah, they don't.
Say it again.
Yeah, don't regulate the out of it. Don't regulate the out of it. But
then-
yes, don't go down that road. It's like, don't ruin this.
Another thing that was brought up was the recertification process and tightening that up. That was agreed upon.
Yep.
Because
Self care.
They weren't aware of a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
That, you know, they didn't know.
Yeah, there was some recommendations also around supervision, like
Yeah.
supervisors, maybe even being coaches previously, things like that.
having
Definitely
these-
having to take the RCA.
Yeah.
That's a big recommendation that I think they're looking at. They want to maybe implement self-care into organizational structures, like making it organizational, like that they have to,
That's going to be tough.
talk about, hey, yeah, it is.
It's good. That's going to be tough
I
because
think
it's
trauma's the biggest one.
Well, that too,
Yeah,
that
trauma
could be
informed
part
care.
of, the self-care, that type of. So, yeah.
all right. Any last thoughts?
We'll see what happens July 15th.
Is that's the date?
Yeah.
What time?
3 to 5.
3 to 5.
Richard, you coming this time?
I may.
One Ashburton Place.
Let me just wind this down here, and then to everyone who's listening out there, don't forget you can hear us on iTunes, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. As you saw, if you do send me an email, we will read it on the air, comment on it, and probably make fun of it. You can and
Don't be a about it.
you can find the form at budswithsuds.com, and also you can call and leave us a voicemail at 978-219-9554, in which case we'll play it on the podcast and then comment on it. So for this roundtable, we're going to wrap this up. I'd like to thank Danny Ginivan, Katie O'Leary, and Dennis Doris for
Certified.
for participating in this roundtable.